Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel Books with Meena. I'm Meena and today I'm going to be reviewing the Brothers Sinister series by Courtney Milan. So this is a historical romance series of companion novels, and they're obviously romances taking place in 1800s, in the mid 1800s during Victorian era England, and each book you're following different characters and different couples. And obviously, since this is a romance series, you will follow two characters falling in love throughout the course of the book. And this overall has 7 books, which includes 4 full-length novels and 3 novellas. So let's just, I'll just jump right in with talking about the order of the books and the names and everything. So the first book is actually book 0.5, and that is The Governess Affair. This one is the prequel. It takes place 20 to 30 years before the first book, and it sets up the entirety of the Brothers Sinister series. The first, number one book is the full-length novel, and this one is the Duchess War, and this one is taking place 20 to 30 years after the Governess Affair, which is actually like the prequel novella. Then we have book 1.5, which is also a novella. This one is A Kiss for Midwinter. Book 2 is the Heiress Effect. Book 3 is the Countess Conspiracy. Book 4 is the Suffragette Scandal, and book 4.5, which is also a novella, is Talk Sweetly to Me. I would like to talk about Courtney Milan's writing, and if you would like this series based on what type of a reader you are. So if you like romances, I think that these books are really great to pick up. If you're used to reading historical romance, you probably already have read Courtney Milan because she is very popular in this genre. If I'm not wrong, she self-publishes. She's like one of the self-published romance authors who's pretty successful. And if you like romance, you can read these books, but I will say that they are pretty plot heavy, so there's like a balance of plot plus romance, and sometimes the plot can definitely overtake the romance aspects of this book. And if you're not a big fan of the couple staying away for like long periods of time, or you just want to see two people fall in love and you don't want other things happening outside of the relationship, you don't like spending time in those parts of the book, then maybe Courtney Milan's books might not be the most suitable for you. But otherwise, her writing is great. It is not too flowery or purple prose. It is still beautiful, emotional, and impactful. She just she does use metaphors, and usually with metaphors and stuff like that in writing, they get categorized as like flowery writing, comparing one thing to the other. But the way she writes metaphors is just very fluid, and you understand what it's trying to say. You totally get the emotion and the impact of that message or that sentence, whatever it is. Even her characters, with especially historical romances that I have read, typically what happens is that the characters tend to fall into certain like archetypes, I guess, or tropes. You have the rake, you have the wallflower, you have like the naive, innocent young girl, or the damaged hero. And I do like reading some of those tropes, and they can be a lot of fun, but sometimes they do feel a little over the top or ridiculously like dramatic. And that is not the case with Courtney Milan's books. They are a little bit more nuanced and less in your face about it, though these type of characters do exist in her book too. It is just written in a more like down to earth way, I guess. It's not very over the top. Her books are a little bit more on the serious side. So if you have read like Julia Quinn or Tessa Dare, they tend to write like the rom-com type of historical romances where things are more funny and fluffy, and they're very just like fun to read. With Courtney Milan's books, there are obviously moments which are funny and humorous and joyous, I guess, but for the most part her books are on the more serious side. She does tend to delve into some more harder and difficult topics, and more like social issues which existed at that time, like racism, classism, sexism, mental health, trauma, and all of these things she does include in her books. And there will be some trigger warnings for her books, but for the most part, yes, she does delve into these topics, which I really appreciate. It gives you a more like maybe realistic or gritty picture of those times, basically Victorian era England, where people tend to romanticize this era, but there was a lot more going on underneath the surface. So jumping into the books, book 0.5 is The Governess Affair, and this one is about a governess who was basically raped by a duke, and she is now pregnant with his kid. She comes to his doorstep and she wants him to take responsibility of this kid and provide it with all the comfort and luxury that the duke's legitimate child would have gotten, but the duke does not want to take responsibility for this. So he sends his assistant, who is known as the Wolf of Clermont. He is like the one who does the dirty work for the duke, I guess, and he is known to be very ruthless and calculating. And it's basically now the Wolf of Clermont has been tasked by the duke to basically shoo away the governess and make sure that she doesn't return or spread any rumors about the duke that can tarnish his reputation. So this is the romance is between obviously the governess and the Wolf of Clermont. His actual name is Hugo Marshall, and this book is definitely a little bit more dark and grittier than all of the other books in this series. This does have trigger warnings for rape, sexual assault. It doesn't really happen on page, but you do get to see the characters talking about it. It also talks about mental health and illness. One of the side characters has agoraphobia, and you also get to see with Hugo Marshall's past, his childhood. He had quite a traumatic childhood with domestic violence in his house, and so yes, this one is definitely dark, but it still was so well written, and I was totally rooting for the two characters to get together. My favorite part about the romance was how both Serena and Hugo, the two main characters of the book, were just so strong and very like stubborn, strong-willed people, and they kind of have like these huge walls built up around them to survive in the world. But when they meet each other and they slowly get to know each other, they start softening up and falling in love, and they it was like cute at the same time also steamy. So yes, Courtney Milan's books do have a little bit amount of steam in them. They're not like the steamiest thing ever, but it is there are usually 1 to 2 scenes. Usually there's only one scene in the book, but yes, 1 to 2 scenes and not more than that. Book number 1 is The Duchess War, and this one is about Robert, and he is a duke, and he's actually the son of the duke from the book before. So yes, it is all like related. So Robert he's basically writing these handbills anonymously for workers' rights, and then our second main character is Minerva, who is hiding this like huge secret from her past, and if the secret comes out, then her reputation will be tarnished forever and she will be ruined. She won't be able to live in society anymore. So she is just she keeps her head down. She is a wallflower, and she just wants to marry like a decent guy and find protection in marriage. But what happens is that since Robert is writing these handbills, the fingers start getting pointed at Minerva, and people are digging up her past to try to kind of prove that she's the one who's writing these handbills. So Minerva goes to Robert, tells him, "Don't write it. I know that it's you. You're putting my life in danger." But Robert's like, "I don't care. I want to do it. So I'm going to do it." And that is where this book starts, with both of them being kind of rivals on opposite sides and wanting, some different things. But for the most part, I wouldn't call this like an enemies to lovers book at all. This book reminded me a lot of like Pride and Prejudice, or like just like a rom-com. This book had a rom-com feel to it because there were so many moments that felt very familiar, with like grand gestures and the hero coming to save the day type of situation, and the kind of dynamic between a wallflower who's actually secretly pretty kick-ass, and a hero who is more like goofy and cute and fun. So this one gave me a lot of rom-com feels. This one, Minerva does have like this kind of, she cannot stand big crowds and people, surrounding her because of her past trauma. So I guess trigger warning for that. But yes, overall, I really enjoyed this book. I think out of all the 4 main novels, this one was the most fun and cutesy to me. Book number 1.5 is A Kiss for Midwinter, and this is Lydia's book, who is actually the best friend of Minerva from book 1. And so what happened was, Lydia at the age of 15 was taken advantage by an older guy who was actually 25, and he left her pregnant. She then miscarried. The doctors did not want to help her because they thought that she is a woman of loose morals. And back then, Jonas Grantham, who is our second protagonist, he was like an assistant doctor. Lydia remembers him from when she was 15. So this book takes place 6 years later, when Lydia is like 21 and I think Jonas is like 26. So he doesn't remember her. He sees her, thinks that she's a pretty lady, and he wants to get to know her. Possibly, he thinks that Lydia would want to be his wife or something. But Lydia, as soon as she sees him, she hates him. She avoids him at all cost, or she just, she's not particularly nice to him, and Jonas cannot understand why. So this one is definitely an enemies to lovers, one-sided on, for the most part, because Lydia is the one who is hating on Jonas, and he doesn't even remember her from 5 to 6 years before. This book, I usually don't like enemies to lovers, but A Kiss for Midwinter surprised me so much. It was so sweet and endearing. I think that this book, for it is very short because it is a novella, but it packed so much with Lydia and her overcoming her past trauma and getting to know Jonas slowly. And Jonas is also going through his own things. He is a doctor, so his life is a little bit more. You can say he sees things that are a little bit more sad or depressing. You get to see how the poor people can't afford medication, how a lot of people are kept in ignorance about sexual health and protection, all of these things, all of that. So, this book, on the one hand, it was a little bit dark and sad in moments, but I think that the more happy, joyous, moments were of Lydia and Jonas just like falling in love, and that was so hopeful and nice and happy to watch. This one does have a dynamic of this one has a dynamic of sunshine and grump, because Lydia is like very positive and bubbly and bright, whereas Jonas Grantham, on the other hand, is a little bit more, I wouldn't call him grumpy, but he definitely has like a morbid sense of humor, and since his occupation does require him to be a little bit more serious and see things that are a little bit more hard. So yes, I guess that dynamic can be described as sunshine and grumpy hero. Book number 2 is The Heiress Effect, and I have mentioned this before, but this one was my favorite in the series, I think. And this one, you're following Jane, who is basically, she has a younger sister who has epilepsy, and Jane is an heiress. She has £100,000 for her dowry, so we have she has a lot of men flocking towards her to marry her and get her dowry. But she doesn't want that because she wants to protect her younger sister. So basically, she shoos away all these men by being very obnoxious and annoying in public. She wears the most unfashionable dresses and says inappropriate things. And basically, what happens is that unknowingly, she kind of offends one of these guys who is actually an earl. And that brings us to our second main character, who is Oliver. I think, yes, Oliver. And he is the son of a farmer, and he's actually the bastard of the Duke from book number 1. So he's actually the son of Hugo and Serena. He is trying to get into the parliament, but since he is like a commoner and he's a bastard, people don't really see him as an equal. His colleagues look down on him, who are like more rich and have more status, and the Earl is one of those guys. So to win over their trust and to prove himself to be worthy to them, they task him with ruining and teaching Jane a lesson. And Oliver now has to kind of grapple with whether he wants to ruin the reputation of like an innocent young woman, or he really wants to get into the parliament, like, which is more important. On the one hand, not ruining Jane will definitely protect her and save her from ruination, obviously. But on the other hand, getting into the parliament will allow Oliver to create a lot of change on a larger scale. So he has to grapple with that kind of decision. This book was a lot more family heavy than the previous books that I talked about, because you get to see a lot of Jane's family with her younger sister and her non-cooperative uncle. Then we also get to see Oliver's family and how he, especially we get to see his aunt and his younger sister, who are always at odds with each other. I think that this book had a whole variety of emotions, and it definitely made me laugh, but also there were a lot of moments which kind of made me feel I guess sad, or were just very emotional. So yes, this book had like a lot of range of emotions, and I would describe this to be like almost a family drama type of a book, because there were times when the family plot lines would overshadow the romance itself, but I still enjoyed the book. Oliver is very intense as a person. He has a lot of ambition. He wants to achieve a lot. Whereas Jane, on the other hand, I really appreciated her strength in trying to appear as this like very airhead, nonsensical, like ridiculously over the top lady who doesn't know what she's doing, but on the inside she's going through so much. And again, we have like this theme of two people who don't really fit in properly in society. They have like one leg inside, one leg outside. They're not fully accepted, but finding love and acceptance with each other. Book number 3 is the Countess Conspiracy, and in this we're following Violet and Sebastian. We have met them in the first 2 books. They were like the best friends of Oliver and Robert. So Violet is a widow. She's 34 and she doesn't really have much going on in her life apart from being like this like undercover secret scientist. She basically writes papers on these like plants and genetics, hereditary, but she cannot publish them on her own because she's a woman. So she tells her best friend Sebastian, whom she has known since childhood, to do so for her in his name. And Sebastian just wants to, make her happy, so he does it. And he has a reputation for being a rake. He's very notorious for that. On the other hand, he also has gained a reputation for being this like very popular, well-known scientist who some people really look up to, but other people hate him because they think that he's a blasphemer and he is spreading heresy. And so Sebastian has gotten a lot of hate for this. He can no longer lie to his friends, his family anymore. He cannot take this amount of hate anymore. So he goes and tells Violet that I'm not going to do this for you. I cannot do it anymore. So obviously Violet is visibly upset with this, and that is where the story starts. So this one, I went into it knowing that it would be like childhood friends to lovers, with meeting Violet and Sebastian in previous books where they had a lot of banter and snarky moments. They were very sarcastic and humorous. All of that. I expected there to be some there to be a tone of like lightheartedness in this book, because the plot almost felt a little bit like like a lady scientist who is like undercover and hiding, and her best friend is posing for her. Like, it felt more like an adventure type of situation. But this book surprised me in the best possible way. It was way more sad, not sad exactly, but it was definitely a very slow moving, emotional, and quiet kind of like romance story between these two people who have known each other for so long and are pretending in society's eyes to be something that they're not, but in private they're going through so much, and only the both of them know that this other person is going through this. And they truly like understand each other and get each other. They've known each other for so long, so they are the best choice for the other person. Especially with Violet, she in her previous marriage it was not the best, and she suffered a lot through the first marriage, and eventually when her husband passed away, the only thing that she could feel was relief, and she constantly feels like she's not worthy because she could not produce kids, or that she did not mourn her husband properly. And in this book you're slowly getting to see her realizing that she deserves love, that she deserves to be loved, all of those things. Sebastian, on the other hand, is just the best love interest ever because he does everything in his power to make Violet happy and feel comfortable with herself and in her surroundings, all of those things. So yes, I would say probably after the Heiress Effect, this one was my next favorite book. Book number 4 is The Suffragette Scandal, and this one you're following Frederica, who's actually the younger sister of Oliver from book 2, and she is a suffragette. She has basically she has started her own newspaper company, I guess, newspaper press, and for it's a newspaper for women by women, and written basically it is about women's rights and everything, the suffragette movement, all of those things. And a lot of people in the society don't like what she's doing because she is a woman and she's speaking about these things that are not supposed to be spoken about. And we have these like outside forces, like people in power, men in power, who are trying to ruin her and ruin her company so that she does not people basically won't listen to her anymore if that happens. And then we have our second protagonist, who is Edward Clark, and he enters suddenly into the story, and Frederica doesn't know him. Nobody knows him. He just like appears out of nowhere. He's this like mysterious guy who calls himself to be a scoundrel, and he should not be trusted, but he is asking Frederica to trust him with saving her newspaper company and for protecting her reputation, because he is somewhat like of a he's not a detective, but he does have those few qualities that can help in figuring out who is the one behind trying to ruin her and taking them down. And this one, I would say, had the most amount of like banter back and forth. It felt like an adventure where the two characters would like, go on these like almost undercover mission sort of situations, and they would always like be trying to one up each other. They kind of like are obviously attracted to each other, but they also don't completely trust each other. So we have not an enemies to lover situation, but there was a lot of like spark and like that instant connection attraction type of situation. And this book was a lot of fun. I also really appreciated what it was talking about with the suffragette movement. Frederica is a very intense character. She's very passionate about this movement, and she wants to contribute to it and speak about it. She wants to get people on board, all of these things. She's very fiery and driven. I really liked that about her. She is quite the aspirational character. On the other hand, we have Edward, who is also quite intense, but I would say in a very different way. He has gone through a lot of trauma in his I guess in his late teenage years and early youth, and he's still healing from it. Somewhat like Violet from the previous book, he feels like he does not deserve love, that he's not worthy, that he can never have a normal life. And slowly throughout this book, you get to see Frederica and Edward, while having a lot of instant chemistry, banter, attraction, slowly getting to know each other and peeling off the layers one by one, and basically falling in love, because this is a romance series. So yes. Then we have the very last book, and that is Talk Sweetly to Me. This one is book 4.5 and is also a novella. In this, you're following Miss Sweetly, who is a black woman living in England, and she's basically apprenticing for this like astronomer slash mathematician, and she's keeping her head down because she knows that she just wants to be a good daughter for her parents, and she knows that being black in this like very predominantly white place is quite dangerous, and not the most suitable. Stephen Shaughnessy, who is actually Irish, and he writes this column in Frederica's newspaper. So he also has quite like the notorious reputation for being this rake, and also writing this like very scandalous column in the women's newspaper. So they're neighbors, and they keep meeting each other, they keep talking with each other, and there is like this attraction between them. But Miss Sweetly knows that she shouldn't be encouraging anything of the sort, because it can only go downhill. It's not going to lead anywhere. But Stephen is very adamant about liking her and wanting her, and he wants to prove to her that he is worthy of her and that they can be happy together. And this book was probably my least favorite of the entire series, but it's still a very strong book. I think that this has the very like almost the most stereotypical historical romance premise, with like a wallflower who is very much into maths and science, and a hero who is more on the rakish, roguish side. The dynamic between the both of them was fun. I really enjoyed seeing the kind of calculations and the mathematical, astronomical part of this book, the way people calculated things in the past. I guess that was very interesting and different, and I didn't know these things before reading the book. As for Stephen, you do get to read some of his columns in the newspaper, and they were definitely a lot of fun. So yes, this book is the last one in this series, and I still enjoyed it, even if it was my least favorite. And that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. There were a lot of books to talk about in this. Do let me know that, watching this video, if you want to read the Brothers Sinister series now or not, or if you have read it, what are your favorite books, what are your least favorite books, your favorite couple, favorite characters, all of these things. What are some Courtney Milan books that you like or you love? Comment all of these things down below. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment if you wish to do so. And that's it for this video. Goodbye.